save it to this computer. So this is the March 23rd electronic imaging GRA116 class, and we're doing this via Zoom. And so I'm going to switch back to the Zoom information. And so the chat feature that you can use in Zoom allows you to ask questions. However, as the teacher is typically showing things, I'm not always looking at that chat. So if another student sees something in the chat window, you can have that up. You can also have this participants up and be able to raise your hand, give a reaction, show some of the different things that are there. Okay. Any questions on the just getting into Zoom and using Zoom so far? Okay, so I'm going to click on my chat just so that I can see that, and where it says at the bottom you can type anything. I'm just going to put I'm using Zoom chat, so you can see that you can get a message. As soon as you hit a return, it shows there, and you can see that you can say just one person, or you can say go to everyone. So you can go back and forth there. You can even post a file there if you needed to. In the reactions, if I'm asking you, everybody good with this, you may want to go and just put a thumbs up in that reactions down at the bottom. That could help. Yay, the claps. So that helps me understand. You can, let me see, anything else that we need to touch base on right now? I think so far so good. Now, if you have questions, let me know. Anybody?
Somehow I pressed out of it and now I don't know what I did.
Okay. Do you have a Zoom open on your?
Got it.
Excellent.
I must have just accidentally clicked off the side or something.
Okay. And if you are looking at this at the top of your screen or your window, your Zoom window, there should be a full screen or just a partial screen. So I can also see a speaker view or a gallery view. So when speaker view is up there, my picture is very big. And so something to think about. And usually when the speaker is talking, or who the Zoom thinks is the speaker, then a yellow box goes around their picture, and that identifies who is talking, just so you know. Great, so far so good. A few more things that I want to touch base on. I'm going to show you Blackboard. So I need to share my screen and find Blackboard. I thought I was in Blackboard. Okay. So in Blackboard, we want to go to the content area. Oh, before I even do that, come on. I'm going to go into the student view. So this is how I think you will see this. And when you go into content, I've set it up in content by weeks for the rest of the semester. So hopefully everything that we have to start or is due during a certain week should be here. However, you can also look at your syllabus. On the course information, I included the new syllabus. Can I see that in here? Yes, I can. And as we go through this, interesting. My window is all the way at the bottom and it's not showing me anymore. Hold on. Let me see if I can do this. I'm not liking some of this. Okay, here we go. So they required us to put this little notice on here from Governor Baker, who has said no one should be going outside and going to classes. So that's why we're doing these remote classes. And then I've redone each one of the what's going on for each week. So you'll notice for this week, I wanted you to log into Blackboard and look in the folder for this week. We're still going to be covering layer masks and talking about shadows today. So we'll still be doing the classroom class. Your tutorial number 3 is due, but instead of giving me a printout, you are going to just submit onto Blackboard the 2 things that you learned and the URL. Then next week, we'll start talking about color. So I'd like to set it up for every Tuesday morning at 9:30. We will have a Zoom meeting if this all goes well today. And then because I'm assigning some tutorials, we may actually, we may try to just have one Zoom session a week, and these tutorials that I'm assigning will take place, will replace the second class that we normally would have done. The reason I'm thinking that is I can show you in Photoshop with Zoom a demo. However, I don't know how you're going to be able to open Photoshop and do everything while I'm doing it like we did in the classroom. And so I'm thinking that it might be best to have these tutorials which allow you to start and stop, have the files, go into Photoshop and do that for the second class. But we can talk more about that as we're going along. So today I will be setting up a reoccurring meeting, if all goes well, for every Tuesday through the end of the semester, and I will publish the information right here in each of the weeks so that you know how to log on. That Zoom guide that I was just looking at, the 2-pager, is right there. Have all of you gone and gotten your Boston Public Library e-card?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's something you need to do because the tutorials that I'm going to have you watch are from lynda.com. Lynda.com is a paid, you have to pay to watch their videos normally, and the school does not have a subscription to lynda.com through the library. However, Boston Public Library does, and everyone that's in Massachusetts can get an e-library card from Boston Public Library. So you'll go on to this to get your card, write that number down because you are going to need that and your password when you go into lynda.com. And the way that that works is you will be selecting this tab. It brings up the library card login. When I log into that, now it's showing me lynda.com and all of the different things that I can go into. So if you noticed, my mouse is giving me problems. This is the first video that I want us to look at, and it's selections and layer masking, sections intro through 5, this Tim Gray. So I might even be able to just copy this and put it into the lynda.com. Let me see if I can do that. And if I can, there we go. I just wanted to show you what this is going to look like when you're in lynda.com. If you've logged in, you have access. Each one of these is a different section. So some of these things you've already learned. So this whole video course is 3 hours, almost 4 hours, but we're not doing the whole thing. And some of the things I mentioned, you're going to listen to the intro, go through basic concepts, selection tools, you already know those things, so that may just be a review. And then we have some advanced things that you would want to watch all the way through section, up to section 5, I believe is what I said. Yep, through section 5. And you'll notice here, you can watch this intro. You can look at a transcript. So as they're doing the video, everything that he's saying is coming up here. There are also files for each one of these. So there's, for this video, there's 44 megabytes that you would download before the course starts. And you may not even need all of those because there's more than 5 sections in this, but it's a zip file. So you would do that. So when you want to watch it, all you're going to do is click on the video, and it would just go through each one of these. I'm not going to continue on with that. Everybody okay with the lynda.com getting into these videos so far?
Yeah.
Okay, once you try it, I think it'll become clearer, and hopefully if you have any issues, you can always just get in touch with me, and email is going to be critical for us. We have to make sure that we're able to communicate during all of this. And so I'd like to make sure everyone is checking their email at least once a day, their school email. This not being in class, not being able to browbeat you in person is going to be tough for me. And there are some people that don't want to give out their personal cell phones, and I understand that, so that, you know, the teachers aren't all texting you all the time and whatever. So keep that in mind. All right. So that was the lynda.com. And if there's one of these videos per week, it will be listed right here in this folder for the week. And then I've moved the drop boxes into the actual week. So this tutorial number 3 is due today. So you're just going to go out and find a fun tutorial to do in Blackboard, and you will submit that right to the Dropbox inside this folder for March 24th through 26th. And the retouched image Dropbox from way back when we were doing the scanning of the little girl at the fence and the scanning of your picture from home. Now, if you don't have a picture scanned, is there anybody that needs a picture?
I can look for one.
I can, what I'm going to do is I have some old photos that I've scanned. So what I will do is I will email you the zipped file folder that has these old pictures, and you can go in and retouch one of those old pictures. And because, again, we can't print and show everybody what we've done, we will submit those to the Dropbox. But what I'd like you to do is have a before and an after. The after always looks great. Students, I'm always impressed with how well their retouching skills are by the time they finish this assignment. However, you need that before picture somehow to be able to show what you started with versus what you ended up with. Okay, so after this is over, I'm going to write myself a note to send the distressed pictures, stressed scans. Okay. All right, any questions so far about Blackboard? Yeah, Andrea.
I just wanted to give a little tidbit because the Lynda videos with the Boston Public Library, if you haven't tried it yet, at first it kind of makes sure that you pay for it. So I Googled how to get into it so that I could use my library card because it's not as clear as you think. So I'm just letting you know that when it tells you to log in, you have to look for the sign in and then look for the organization piece so that you're not logging in as like a regular person, and you just put in the Boston Public Library and then you put in your card number and then it's free. But
Okay.
other than that, it's at first, it's like they want you to sign in with LinkedIn or make a personal account, and you can get a month free with LinkedIn, but it's not the same as the universal Boston Library card. So you can Google if anyone's stuck, but I'm just letting you know to give you a heads up. That's what I had to figure out. So
Good. Now this right here should get you
okay.
right to that lynda.com, bostonpubliclibrary.org sign in.
I
So
see.
it does skip where they want you to
Okay.
sign in and create an account with LinkedIn and pay for it.
Okay. Sorry. I was just trying to
No,
help.
but that's
Yeah.
good, because another student had that same issue yesterday, and that's why it's now right here in this one is this login, so that you can skip past all of the things where they're trying to sell you the subscription to lynda.com or in LinkedIn. Good. And I'm glad you brought that up. Excellent. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
For the tutorial number 3, you do want pictures, right?
Yes, if you
Okay.
want to upload the pictures, the before and after pictures, that will be great, just to see what the video was, because, or excuse me, what the tutorial was, because when you print it out, I could see what you were learning and what you were doing. But if you just submit the URL website and the 2 things you learned, I'll have to actually go to that URL and try to figure out what it is that the tutorial's doing. So that would be great if we could. And remember, they don't need to be huge pictures. If you used a very large picture because you wanted to create something with your tutorial and then use it later, print it out, or you can still go in and res those down in Photoshop and then submit them to the Dropbox. So start practicing good resolution and image size practices, as well as file format. So if it's something that you need to show layers, make sure you're submitting your PSD files so that I can see the layers, and don't flatten them beforehand, because it's kind of like with math, you want to see how you're working out your equation, and if you just submit the answer, you don't know how you got there. Okay, good. Any other questions so far?
What if we I already like submitted those on the original due dates.
Okay, that's fine. I can, we're on uncharted waters here, and so I will roll with the punches as well as you are. So that's fine. You don't have to go back and redo the tutorial, and because a lot of us don't save the files from a tutorial. I know I don't. So
What if I wanted to resubmit the retouch? Is there a way I could go back into Blackboard and
yes, I
resubmit
will
it?
make sure that the Blackboard Dropbox allows more than one submission. When you add a second file to, or a second submission to your Blackboard Dropbox, just in the comments area, the message area, just say use this one instead of the other one, because
Cool.
sometimes I'll get multiples and they're cumulative. I'm supposed to look at both submissions, or oh, the second submission replaces the first submission. So just let me know.
All right.
Great. Okay. All right, so let me see what else is on my hit list here. We talked about the syllabus. Okay, so next, oh, another great thing, if it happens like they're saying it's going to happen, I've been bugging the school about Adobe Creative Cloud, because there are some students that don't have a subscription to the Creative Cloud, and they've been using the labs, which is great. We have an open lab set up, but with all of the school closed, and even now I believe that the open labs that were next to the cafeteria in Lynn, I think that's closed, even though they said it was going to be open for the mornings by appointment only for 2 hours. So now that may be closed, because Governor Baker just yesterday said no more than 2 people meeting together at a time, other than essential places like a grocery store or hospital. So we may not have the open lab. So what I've requested to the school is figuring out how we can get the graphic design students Adobe Creative Cloud if they don't already have a subscription. So they've asked for a list of all the student names in all of my classes and the other graphic design teachers, as well as your email address. So watch your email. If they can figure out through Adobe how to do this and get you Adobe access through the rest of the semester, they're going to do that. And so we've been going back and forth since last Thursday, and they just came back yesterday and asked for the list. And so I've gotten lists from everyone except the digital photography teachers so far have responded to me, and I've submitted that list to our IT department, to the information systems. And so hopefully we'll see something about Adobe Creative Cloud. If you don't have access to Photoshop, you will be able to watch the videos in lynda.com. You'll be able to watch my demos here in the Zoom meetings. And so for now, that's what we're going to have to do. But I'm hoping in the near future that you will have access to Photoshop, because if you're anything like me, it's so much better actually trying and doing it. I learn by doing more than just watching. Okay. All right. So let's, today we were going to talk about layer masks. And so during class, what I would normally do is actually show you, I would normally download the, download a file to you so that you could do it as well. And who else joined our meeting down here? Could you unmute? Who is at the telephone number at the bottom that called in?
That's me, Destin.
Okay, there's Destin, but there's also somebody else. Just so you know, Destin and this other person that's down here, I'm not sure who that is, at 781-820-2477 is what's showing up. Somebody that called in, I believe. I am going to be...
I couldn't, it's still me. I couldn't get my computer to get anything coming out of it, so I called
that's
in.
great then. Okay, then I'm happy that we've solved that problem. And just so you know, I am recording this whole meeting. So as we're going along, if you need to go back and look at the beginning of it, I will be posting that to YouTube, and I will post it right in the Blackboard where it says Zoom meeting. I will post the link right in that folder as well. Okay, so let's go into Photoshop, and I'm going to share my screen, and we'll look and see if I can find my Photoshop. Oh, I put this in there just to make you smile. Zoom meeting, if you're just doing audio, this is what you look like. Zoom meeting with video, you spiff it up a little bit. Just so you know, the reason we're using Zoom and not, some of the classes may be using Blackboard Collaborate as the meeting tool. Most businesses now are using tools like Zoom outside of their companies to have meetings to save on airfare or drive time. So I figured it was a really good thing to try to use Zoom for this course, just to help you out so that when you get into your jobs later on, maybe this will help you be, you know, savvy about how to do all of this. So let's get into Photoshop. So here's my Photoshop. I'm not sure what you can see in the window. I'm hoping you're seeing my panels as well as the workspace area, the canvas. Everybody good with this? Yeah, seeing everything? Okay, so what's wrong with the picture that I have on the screen?
It looks like he's, oh, sorry.
That's okay. Anybody?
There's no shadow.
Okay, yeah. And you'll notice that having a shadow makes him look grounded. Right now, he looks like he's floating. And so shadows are really important. If this gentleman was put into this picture, you would say this is a fake photoshopped picture because we've just pasted him in there and there's no shadow underneath him. So what we need to do is figure out how to create a shadow. And so I've done a little bit of work, and so I have already silhouetted or made a selection around this gentleman. And if I create another layer underneath this, and I could even put white in that layer just so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to fill this layer with white. Okay, so I did a quick selection, as you can see, not great, but I now am looking at the man layer as well as this white background layer, and I've hidden the other layer that has the full picture in it. So I'm not looking at that. At this point, my options for shadows, working on layer 2, which is going to be my shadow layer, I could use my brush. And when you use the brush, what I may want to do is pick the color. So I can come over and pick any color on here, and I can go up here and say I want to use black. I can make my brush bigger. Remember the braces or brackets, open bracket, closed bracket will give you a bigger. I can look at the hardness, very hard or soft edge brush, and then I can put in a shadow. If I want, I can change my flow so that it's lower, and I can change the color so that it's not 100%. So 0, 0, 0, and maybe I want 50% black. So now I can be putting a shadow. Now, if the sun is right above his head, the shadow is most likely going to be below him. If the shadow or the sun is off to the side, the shadow most likely will be out here. I can use the retouching tools that we've learned so far. I can use, oops, I didn't pick it. I can use the blur tool and blur the shadow even more. I can use the eraser tool and start softening the edge of what I'm doing and take it away. So I can do a lot of these things, and I want that to be a soft edge on there so that it's going to give me a nice. So I can do all of these things. I can also change the opacity on the shadow layer. So right now, if you look at this, that shadow that I've been creating is right on top of the image. Let's see, oops, that's on my shadow layer. I can't do that now. So if I want to see the texture of the asphalt, I have to change the opacity of the layer. And by changing the opacity, I can start seeing what's there underneath. And I put that white background in that I probably shouldn't have originally. But you can see that I'm starting to see through my shadow and creating a new shadow. Now, something we should also know when you're working with shadows, the shadow layer, we haven't really talked a lot about blending, but these blending modes for layers, when you create a shadow, you want multiply to be your blending mode for a shadow. What that does is it overprints. It will overprint your shadow on top of whatever's underneath it, and it will do it so that it's neutral. When you look at the shadows that are already in this picture, what can you tell me about the shadows that are here? Do they look a little bluish?
Yeah.
So one of the things we may want to think about is when I pick my color, I want my colors to match what's already in there. So if I pick a bluish color to create my shadows and then come over to the brush, now as I'm doing this, it's going to be more blue, and I'm putting it on top of the black one, so it's not as blue. But you need to remember that as you're picking these colors, the shadow needs to simulate what's already in the picture. So that's questions? Okay, so that's one way of making a shadow. I'm going to take this whole layer off and create a new one. So now I'm going to have my shadow 2 layer. We know that we have geometric shapes. So I can create a shape, and when I create a shape like an ellipse, when I create that shape, this is yellow. Where's that yellow coming from? It shouldn't be, I don't want a stroke in there. I don't even want a gradient. I want a color. I'm going to pick, my mouse is really messing with me. Okay, I'm going to create and fill this with the foreground color. Oh, where's my fill? I created a shape. It's got this blue, no stroke. There. It was the stroke that was on there. I shouldn't have a stroke. So now I have this shape, this elliptical shape. I can still move this around. And one of the things that I want you to understand is when you have a shape, you can make this pixels, you can make it a vector file, or you can make it a layer. And we'll talk more about those later. But for now, I'm going to just take this shape and let me see. I want to rasterize the shape. So now the shape is pixels. So you can see over here, my thumbnail shows it just like the thumbnail of the gentleman. From there, I can go into my filters and blur this shape. And when I start blurring it, you'll notice what I'm doing for the shadow. This was hard-edged before like this, but now I can make it into a blurred shape. What does that do for me? When I turn on this picture, I now have a blue shadow underneath the gentleman as if the light were right above his head, and I still have to change the opacity. And because it's a shadow layer, I always want to go in and change it to multiply. And so I now have a shadow that I can manipulate till it looks like the ones that were already in the picture. Okay, so that's a second way of creating a shadow. The third way of creating a shadow, and I'm going to make another layer. Is this all coming through so you can see it okay?
Yeah.
On your computer? Bless you, Brianna. Okay. Another way is to take your image, and what we want to do is create, I'm going to take this background off. I'll create a selection. So I'm going to create a selection around this gentleman. I am going to inverse this. So now I have just him selected. And what I'm going to do is take this selection or copy what's in there and put it in my shadow layer. So now he's actually in my shadow layer. And so with this selection still made, I'm going to fill that. I'm going to fill this, fill this selection of this gentleman with, let's say, black for now. So now I have him above, that's the man, and I have this layer that's a dark shape. What I want to do from here is get rid of my selection. So I deselect the selection, and all I have is this gentleman. I can put him back there, and what I'm going to do is use my transform tools. So we know that we can do all sorts of distorting with the transform tools. So now I can move this around, this black shadow shape. I can rotate that. I'm going to go back to free transform. Rotate him. If the sun's coming from over there, I can manipulate this to try to stretch and get this shadow where I want it. Let's say that that's what I think the shadow should look like. Once I'm happy, it's there. Now I can go in and just do my blur on this shadow layer. And by doing the shadow layer, I can manipulate the shadow that's here as well. Go in and change the opacity, make it into a multiply shadow. And when I turn on that shadow, you can see that I have more down here. So I can change the opacity until it's lower. So now I actually have his shape, but distorted like a shadow would, depending on where the sun's coming from. And I can see the sun's coming this way, so the shadow should be extending this direction. Now, what if we didn't have enough room? If this was just a white background, I could increase my canvas size. Do you remember canvas size? Image, canvas size. And what canvas size will say is, this currently is a very small little file. The artboard or canvas is only 2.2 by 2.9. If I wanted to, I could say, leave this picture that's currently here, leave it in the upper left corner of my new, and I want to add and make it 4 inches wide by 5 inches tall. What color do you want in the background? Maybe I'm going to say white, just to see what that looks like. When I say OK to canvas size, I've now added this amount of space, went from 2.2 out to 4 inches wide, and added the height. So now if my shadow layer needed to extend or be bigger or rotate, I'd have to increase the background as well. But let's say it wasn't with the background, it was just with this gentleman. Now I've got a bigger space to work for. I'm not clipping that shadow off at the edge of the page because I needed it bigger. So that's another way of creating a shadow. Now, one more way, and this is going to be a little trickier. So we have the ability to create a layer mask. Have we talked about layer masks yet? Yes, no? Layer masks give us the ability to, I'm going to create one more new layer, and layer mask. And what a layer mask will allow us to do is once we have that selection created, let's see, what's the easiest way to do this? I think I'll go back to the gentleman layer, create one more selection outside, then inverse it so I just have him selected. Copy that. And then on my layer mask, I want to create a layer mask. So in the layer mask layer, I've gone to this area where I'm going to do a shadow. It's showing this layer mask. And what I'd like to do is have this shape, put him in there, fill him, inverse that one more time. I'm going to fill him, or just keep that as a selection. And then with this layer mask, I can actually make a gradient. Let's find my gradients under the fill. When you put a gradient, a black to white gradient in a layer mask, what you're actually doing is making something transparent or not transparent. And I want this one. So I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I'm actually taking this gentleman and making him fade away. And so if I wanted this to be a shadow, I could do that if this fill was just black. Let's go over and make sure that we can fill him with black. Inverse, and then edit, fill. So all I'm doing is filling this shape of the man with this. And now I have this fading away gradient inside here. So as I come over, I should be able to put in top to bottom. And then as I rotate this around, I've got, oops, I need to be on my mask. I can move this in, and you'll notice that as I'm doing this, I've got transparency, I've got his shape, but I still have the ability to go in and manipulate the space. So using this, I can do a little bit, I could do a lot, depending on how big this gradient is. So what a layer mask allows us to do is it takes and adds this extra area onto our layer as if it's right on top of it, and it allows us to use black to white. The black means that it's going to show what's ever in here. The white is like it's transparent, or the opacity is 0. And so white means it's fading to nothing, whereas the black means show everything that's on the layer. If I turn that layer off or take it off, it will just show me what's in the layer. So when you do your lynda.com video, it will show you how to blend one picture into another picture. This one I'm showing you is really to show you how it's going to work with a shadow, just creating a shadow. Okay, and I moved the layer mask, not the layer. You want to move both of them together. So we can do something like that, and then when I take my selection off, I still have the ability to go in and blur that layer mask so I can get the shadow. So it's one more way of creating a shadow and making it fade away. Okay. Does all of that somewhat seem clear? Make sense? Okay. What I'm going to have you do is next week's, or in a couple weeks, we'll be doing a project that will require that you make shadows as well, just so you know. But for now, we're going to leave this here, and when you go through the lynda.com video, you will be able to understand a little bit how you can use layer masks for blending two pictures together, or layers masks to make shadows like we've done here. Okay, so different ways of making shadows. We have the drawn one, which is just using the brush. We have one that used a shape, an ellipse, and it put it underneath. One that took the shape and filled it with black and rotated it and then made it softer. Or we can use a layer mask. One thing you should know with shadows, let me go in and look at, say, this one. When we're doing shadows, remember, a shadow is typically not just one tone. So in the case of the shadow here, I may need to put in another shadow, a darker shadow just down by the bottom as I'm working on this. Let me darken this up a little. And as you're adding, around the edges, there may be a darker bit of shadow that fades away to the lighter one. So keep that in mind, that there may be one diffuse or blurred lighter shadow, and then right up next to the product or the person or whatever you're making the shadow for, it's going to be much darker. So typically you will need to add a secondary shadow to what you're working on, because there's a dark one and a light one. Let me see if around her feet. See how she's got a really dark one right underneath her feet, but then she's got also a darker one from the trees and things. So something to think about there. All right, that's what I wanted to show you in Photoshop today. So I will get back to this screen here. And what else did we want to talk about? What questions do you have about the course or about Photoshop? Anybody?
Are we still we're doing the car assignment?
Yes, we are still doing the car assignment. And if you look at the syllabus, let me go and check out the syllabus, if I can find it wherever that would be. Where is my Acrobat? I don't think I closed Acrobat. Hold on one second. I'm just looking for the screen to show. There it is. Okay, when we look at the syllabus, the dream car will be due April 7th. So we have a little bit more time for the dream car. You may want to put in a shadow. So that's one of the reasons why I had this assignment or this lesson here. You may also want to do some color adjustments. So next week we will be talking about color adjustments and doing more color adjustments, because in Photoshop, typically you remove backgrounds with Photoshop, you adjust color, you remove any artifacts like dust or trash that's on the ground, and you size the pictures. That's the majority of the things that graphic designers do. Photographers do a lot more with Photoshop or artists may do a lot more with the retouching tools. However, for us, Photoshop as a graphic designer really comes down to making sure the color looks good, making sure the silhouettes or shadow creations are good. And beyond that, that's about what we're doing and making sure the size is correct for either the website or the print piece that we're doing. So we're going to spend a couple weeks on color. And so, but your dream car will not be due until the 7th of April. And then in class on the 14th, we will actually be looking at everybody's dream car. So once you're finished with those, because we won't be able to print them out, mount them, and display them in class, we're going to try to do that using the meeting that we're going to do. Make sense?
Yeah. Do you have notes on how to do the license plate? Because I actually don't remember.
Okay. Yes, and very quickly, I may even be able to show you that if you have a second. So back in Photoshop, hold on. Am I in Photoshop? Let me go back. Stop sharing because that didn't work well. Share. Let me find my Photoshop screen. Share this. If you want to open a license plate, and let me see. Assignments, dream car, plates. Let me see if I have one that's already done. That would be too easy. Open. Okay. So once you get rid of the letters, and that's going to be using your clone stamp tool, healing brush, you want to remove the letters, which is what we have here, and then you're going to add text. So whatever your dream car license plate would be. And so I'm going to, oops, that was to the left. And for this, I'm going to put New Hampshire plate. Oops, and they're all uppercase. And I need to think about the font. And so for New Hampshire's plate, I may just be using something like Geneva, if it's on here. Talk about having too many fonts open. I need to manage my fonts a little bit better, I think. I should just type Geneva. Okay. And once you have your text in here, this is a live text layer. Remember, with your text panel, oops, I don't want that to be up there. Oh, my computer screen keeps going back into Zoom when I move things down. So this is a little annoying. Let me get rid of this layer. Oh, I did not want to start that. Let me just double click. Okay, so back on the New Hampshire plate layer. One of the things that you should know is when you have text in Photoshop, you can actually work on that text and manipulate the text. Unlike most other programs, we don't like to manipulate the text, the font. But in this case, I'm going to say I'd like to make a taller typeface. And I'd like to maybe space this out a little bit. So I'm going to add some spacing in between my layers, or my letters, excuse me. So once I have that there, this face would be a little thicker if it was a real typeface, but I'll show you. Now that I have a text layer with the text on there that I want, and let's say that the color really should be green, like the New Hampshire plate. Let's say it's something like that. Once you have that, if you look on your layers panel, we have this FX, What FX allows you to do is put in a bevel emboss, a drop shadow, outer glow, all of these, but we're going to use the emboss. And what the emboss does is it allows you to, I don't want an inner bevel, I want an emboss. What the emboss does is it makes the letters look like they're 3D, like they're standing out. And so all of these, you will need to manipulate some of these different things to make it look like more depth, a bigger or smaller amount of beveling. I can soften that bevel. You'll notice we have a light side and a dark side to our, that is all about where the light is coming from. So if I look at my license plate, I may find that the light is coming from above. I can see on this little area here, and it's darker. So I may want to make the light up here to make it match what's in the picture already, that there's a light bar showing. I can then change how much of the plate I'm seeing through there or not with this opacity, seeing a lot through or a little bit through. This shadow side, I can change the tone of the shadow, saying maybe it's too dark, maybe it's not dark enough. On the shadow side, I can darken that up. So I can do many of these features and functions just by trying these in here. Once you're happy with them, you can say okay, and you still have the ability to go in and say, you know, I don't want plate, I want New Hampshire plays. Oops. Maybe. So I can change the text and it still has this. Now you'll notice most license plates aren't round on the top. They have this beveled part, but they may not be roundish on the top. So what I'm going to do is take my whole license plate text and I'm going to duplicate this layer. If I can get to it. Yep. Duplicate the layer. Make a copy of my text. So now I have both of these layers have this FX. They have this beveling on it. So what I'd like to do is my topmost layer for the text, I'm going back into it and double clicking on the FX brings this back up. I want to take the bevel and emboss off of this layer. So by doing that, by turning the bevel and emboss, what I actually have is the regular bevel and emboss layer down underneath, but then the top layer has no bevel and emboss. It's just flat text. So by doing that, I can change the flatness of the letters on top, but still have the bevel underneath. If I wanted to change this a little bit and mess with it, I can take this text, I can add graininess to it, I could put dirt on it, I could even go back in and say, yes, I want to have a layer effect, but the layer effect I want is a stroke. And that stroke, I want that to maybe, right now it's looking like it's white. I don't want white. I want a light green, a lighter green than is there. Because on my plate, I noticed that that's the way it looked. So I can put that stroke on there. I can make it a little bit bigger. I can say, put it on the inside and bring down my size a little. So that's another thing that I could do. That's just on the flat text layer. So I'm using the FX on this layer to put a stroke on the text. the FX on this layer to put the bevel, the emboss. Does that help?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I can still resize my text and all of this, but make sure you have both layers, because if you don't have both layers selected, when you try to move them or size them, it won't, it will do just one and not the other, and they'll get thrown out of whack. Okay. All right. So that's how you would do this. Once you then take this and put it onto the car, you're going to be using more of your transform tools, your maybe distort, skew, perspective, but you have to flatten that image first. Okay. All right. So all of that good. I'm going to stop sharing that so I can see all of you. And any other questions?
So we're not meeting again till next Tuesday?
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to ask. What do you think? Do you want to do the twice a week meetings, or would you like to use the second day, the Thursday class time, and look at the lynda.com videos? That's what I was thinking might be easier, because then you can actually use Photoshop, pause the video, use that. What do you think?
That works for me, but whatever everyone else wants to do.
Yeah, works for me
That's
too.
fine.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, seems like that's what we're going to try to do. I'm hoping we have Photoshop for everybody. If the school can arrange that. Who has a subscription to Photoshop at home?
I do.
Yeah, I
I
do.
do.
Okay, so a lot of people already have it, so you should be able to. If you don't have it, send me an email just to make sure I know that you're one of the ones that I'm fighting for, because I'm really going at the school saying, hey, if you want to say that you're doing the classes like they were on the original syllabus, it means they need to use the software. Okay. All right, so I will be posting a new meeting in the next, and inviting all of you to that meeting for next Tuesday during class time. If you have any questions in between, you can either call me, I'll put my cell phone out there, you can text me, you can email me, and I think communication right now and staying home and just communicating by this might be our best bet. Anybody have any problems with this format? And if you do, just send me an email. I don't want to take up everybody's time with that if that's the case. Okay, I think we're good, and I'm going to stop recording, and I will post